It has just been announced that Paramount and Activision have signed a deal that allows Paramount to develop and produce a live-action Call of Duty movie. This would also give Paramount the right to make multiple Call of Duty movies and even TV shows. Now, it has not been confirmed what they are going to be adapting from the Call of Duty franchise. All it says is that they are going to be making a live-action feature film based on Call of Duty, designed to thrill its massive global fanbase by delivering on the hallmarks of what fans love about the iconic series. I have wanted a Call of Duty movie for years, so the fact that this day is finally coming is pretty insane to me. So I wanted to do a video talking about what I want to see out of the Call of Duty movies that they eventually do, what movies should they make, how should they do them, and the same thing goes for their TV shows. Before we get into what they should do, let's talk about what they shouldn't do with the movies or TV shows that they produce. The thing I'm worried about more than anything is that they'll just make a generic war film that has no relation to Call of Duty whatsoever, but they'll just slap Call of Duty on the title because it's a war film and call it a day. That would be the worst thing they can do. I do not want to see them make just a regular war film with the Call of Duty name attached to it. Even if it's a really good movie, it would just feel weird. Why make it a Call of Duty movie then? Why not just make it any other type of movie? If you're going to do a Call of Duty movie, make it based on the Call of Duty IP, the characters, the stories, the events, everything that's happened in Call of Duty. They should be adapted to the big screen. I also don't want to see them do what the Fallout series did, and the Fallout series is really good, don't get me wrong, but that wouldn't work for Call of Duty. And what the Fallout series did is it basically just did a separate new original story within the Fallout universe. It takes place in the same universe as the games, but it's its own story entirely. And the reason why that wouldn't work with Call of Duty is because Call of Duty isn't a unique universe. It doesn't have this very unique theme to it, this unique feel. Call of Duty is quite similar to our own universe that we live in. So I wouldn't really see the point of them just doing a movie that happens to take place in the same universe as the games, but it has nothing to do with those games. And let's say they made it so it was connected to the games, but in like a spin-off sort of a way. For example, imagine taking Ghost from the Modern Warfare games and giving him an origin backstory as a movie. That does sound like a cool concept for a movie, don't get me wrong, but I don't like the idea of it taking place in that game universe because the universes within the Call of Duty franchise are so damn messy. They're all over the place. What's considered canon or what's not considered canon, it's all over the place. And so I feel like if you're going to do a movie franchise or a TV show, you should do it in its own universes that adapt the different stories from the video games. They should not be in the same universe as the video games. If they want to do a Ghost origin story, just do that as a Call of Duty campaign in the future. Don't do that as a movie. When it comes to the soundtracks of these movies and shows, they really do need to use music from the games. Obviously not all of the music, and definitely not for every scene of the movies in the games. They still have to make some original music for it, but it would be nice if they actually utilize the music from whatever they're adapting. So for example, if they're doing a Modern Warfare movie, they should be using some of the music from the Modern Warfare games in the movie. And the last thing I don't want to see them do is cheap out on these projects, and that's kind of a given, but they should put the best possible talent behind these. Make sure there's large budgets behind these. You really need to make them as good as humanly possible, and get someone who's very passionate about the Call of Duty storylines to be at least an advisor to the writing team for these movies and TV shows. You can't just get a whole team of people who have never played Call of Duty before and have them just jump into the scripts of these games and try to make something out of it, because I feel like you're not going to end up with a really solid project out of that. Maybe a decent movie, but is it going to be authentic to the Call of Duty experience? Who knows? I think it has a better chance of being that if you get some people who are really, really passionate about the Call of Duty storylines, even if they have to advise different YouTubers who are like very active with the Call of Duty community. I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that. Let's get into what Call of Duty movies and TV shows they should make, because obviously there's been a lot of storylines throughout the Call of Duty franchise, so it's hard to tell which ones they're actually going to pick. I'm going to be talking about a little bit of spoilers for some of the Call of Duty campaigns, so if you haven't played them, I would definitely recommend not watching every section of this video. First things first, I think they need to start off with the original Modern Warfare trilogy and do a movie trilogy out of those 3 games. Each game definitely has enough content for one full film, probably around 2.5 hours, and it should adapt the storylines pretty closely, not one-to-one of course. There would be some changes to make it fit for the big screen better. You don't have to have quite literally every single mission adapted to the movie, but at least majority of them in a similar structure to the games. And because I don't think they should ever bother adapting the new Modern Warfare trilogy into a movie series, they should take a few elements from those games and put them into this trilogy that is based on the original Modern Warfare series. For example, Farah in the Urzikstan Liberation Force would fit very well in the COD 4 Modern Warfare storyline. I think it'd be really cool if the first movie starts off with the All Gillied Up mission and it has Price and McMillan slowly on their way to assassinate Zakhaev, and just have that entire mission play out within like a 10-minute opening sequence. It would be incredible. And of course, everything else that happens in the campaign would happen all the same, ending with Soap taking out Zakhaev. Then you jump into the sequel, which of course would be retelling the Modern Warfare 2 2009 story, which would likely start with no Russian, which is obviously one of the most shocking missions in Call of Duty history. So having that on the big screen would be crazy. And of course, that would escalate into World War III, which is what most of that game is centered around, leading to Shepard's betrayal, and of course, Soap finally getting to kill him in the final mission, which of course would be the end of that movie. And then you jump into the third film, which would be Modern Warfare 3, and the scale gets absolutely crazy here, where you have massive battles in New York, London, Berlin, Paris, and of course, it ends with Makarov's death. After, of course, Soap also died. Pretty much all that crazy stuff. With the right creative team, I definitely think this could be a fantastic movie trilogy. For who would direct it, I think my picks would be either Sam Hargrave, who directed Extraction and Extraction 2, which basically are already Call of Duty movies. They're these insane action-packed films starring Chris Hemsworth, and I really recommend you check them out because they are amazing. But he would be a great director for a Call of Duty film. Chad Stahelski would be also pretty good. He directed the John Wick films, and he obviously does a great job with action. Any director that's really good with shooting action scenes that have a lot of guns in them would be great for a Call of Duty film. Joseph Kosinski is also really solid. He, of course, did Top Gun Maverick and the recent F1 film. He is probably the best director out of all of these, at least in my opinion, but I don't know if he'd be the best pick for this. I just know he already has worked with Paramount before with Top Gun Maverick, so I think it would be cool if he came over and did a Call of Duty film. And lastly, Alex Garland. I wouldn't expect him to make a Call of Duty movie. I don't think he'd be interested in that, but he is a director who has done some really grounded and gritty war films, including Civil War and the recent Warfare movie. I don't know if he'd want to do a movie like Call of Duty though, because I feel like his style tends to be a bit more grounded and gritty when it comes to his war films, and Call of Duty is a bit more over the top, so I'm not sure if he would want to do that sort of style, but I personally think Call of Duty should be a bit more over the top. That's just the nature of the campaigns, let's be honest. And as for composers, there's a million different options here, but I would love to see Lorne Balfe return because he did actually do the soundtrack for Modern Warfare 2 2009, which in my opinion is one of the best soundtracks in Call of Duty history. A lot of people think that Hans Zimmer did that entire game soundtrack, but Hans Zimmer actually only did the main theme of MW2. Of course, Hans Zimmer is the GOAT though, so I would love to see him compose a Call of Duty movie as well, but there's plenty of options you have. I just think Hans Zimmer or Lorne Balfe would be my main choices. Now let's talk about Black Ops, because the Black Ops series has a lot of interesting stories. I would argue even more interesting stories in the Modern Warfare games, but the Modern Warfare games tend to execute their stories a bit better, whereas the Black Ops series has been very messy in the past. I would say they only really nailed it a few times, but I do think the Black Ops series would work better as a TV series, and this would be a good balance between doing a couple different movies while also doing a TV series at the same time. And no, I don't think it should be in the same universe as the Modern Warfare games. They should separate these as much as they can. There's really no reason to connect them other than for the sake of trying to do some like Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think is kind of a waste of time. And I think this Black Ops series should be a total of 6 seasons, with each season adapting one of the games. The first season would be, of course, Black Ops 1. It would focus heavily on the brainwashing of Alex Mason and how he's affected by all of that, and of course, everything going on in the Cold War at the time. It would have some scenes during the Vietnam War, maybe even some flashbacks with Rezanov back in World War II, with of course that big twist that Rezanov was never actually there towards the end. I think that would be obviously a really big moment, and would end with Mason killing Dragovich, just like the Black Ops 1 campaign. I think the Black Ops 1 campaign is phenomenal, and doing that in a 10-episode season 1 would be pretty awesome. The Black Ops series in general just has a lot more stuff you can do with the characters, a lot more character work, and the events take place over a pretty significant amount of time, so it would work really well as a TV show. There could be a lot of downtime where characters are just being developed, there's a lot of dialogue. I think it would be really awesome. Season 2 would dive into a whole new storyline, which a lot of shows have done this in the past, where another season comes out and it's a whole new story with the same characters, of course. And season 2 of this show would be about Black Ops Cold War story, which would be all about Perseus. Adler would be introduced. Of course, you'd have characters like Park, and even Bell, of course, would come into the story, but he would actually be like a character that actually speaks, not some voiceless character that doesn't do anything like he did in the campaign. Of course, he would actually be a full-on character, but they would still do the same exact twist with him actually being originally with the Soviets. And I think you can do a lot with this season, but like I said, it would be very disconnected from season 1, but still continuing the characters characters of Alex Mason and Frank Woods and developing them further and doing a lot more with them than the Black Ops Cold War campaign did, because I feel like the campaign didn't do a lot with them, whereas this one should have them be more of a focal point. Then Season 3 would be all about Black Ops 2's past missions, because of course, for those of you who don't know, Black Ops 2 is split up into 2 separate sections with missions that take place in the past and then missions that take place in the future. And that campaign did a great job with interweaving them, and it made a lot of sense, but I do think you could just have the entire past section of Black Ops 2 being an entire season of this show, with Menendez being the main focal point of it. And he, of course, is a fantastic villain. In my opinion, one of the best villains in video game history, not even just in Call of Duty. And so he could definitely be a fantastic villain in this series that starts in this season. And it would end with the tragic death of Alex Mason and Hudson, which would be a huge moment to have both those characters be killed off, probably in the finale of Season 3. Of course, Woods would also be heavily injured to the point where he needs to go in a wheelchair after that moment. It would be just like a really heartbreaking episode and would definitely change a lot of things going into Season 4. But the difference here is that you would have other characters still being involved, because of course I don't think they should just throw away characters that they introduced in Season 2. So characters like Adler and Park would still be a part of Season 2 and still have a role to play in the story. Season 4 would then be focused on Black Ops 6's story that takes place in the 90s, and of course you do have some time jumps going on here, but of course with enough makeup, you can make the actors look a bit older than they actually are. It's really not the end of the world. And although I think most of the other campaigns have better stories than Black Ops 6, I do think Black Ops 6 has an interesting story that you could explore here, of course, with the Cradle and Jane Harrow and everything with the Gulf War. Obviously, it'd be a very different season because, of course, Mason and Hudson are no longer there, so Adler would become more of a focal point. Of course, you'd have Case being introduced as a new character, as well as Marshall. It would be a very different season, but I think it would still work. Woods would still be there in the wheelchair. And I think they could change up the story a bit here by having Woods and Adler maybe being focused on trying to track down Menendez even during all this other stuff happening, so that plot line stays relevant even in this season. And then Season 5 would have a massive time jump all the way into 2025. Obviously, you would have to have a lot of makeup done on characters like Woods to make them look a lot older. Marshall could show up again, of course. Maybe Adler could die in Season 4. I don't know. And this would be all about the Black Ops 2 future storyline, with David Mason being the main lead and Harper and all those other characters as well. And I think Black Ops 2's future stuff is some of the best stuff in the Black Ops series, so there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this. Of course, it's all focused on Menendez. He is now back and he is doing his full Cortes DA plan, and it would end with, of course, David Mason killing Menendez and basically having all that play out. You wouldn't have that ending where David is suddenly still alive or any of that stuff. None of that would happen. It would be quite literally the ending where Menendez is killed, and that's that. Unless the Black Ops 7 campaign absolutely sucks and the story is trash. Because if that happens, then I do think they should instead have this season end where Menendez doesn't die in the end and he continues as a villain in the final season, which of course would be Season 6. But if whatever they end up doing in the Black Ops 7 campaign ends up being really interesting and cool and unique and works good as a story, then I think that should be the final season of this story. It seems like the Black Ops 7 campaign is going to be focusing on a lot of things related to AI, so I'm assuming Menendez is obviously not still alive, he instead is AI, and someone's using his AI to reenact some of his plans or continue his plans. And I guess we'll find out who's behind all of that. It seems like they're going to be using Cradle against David Mason and some others, so of course that's going to be interesting to see. That'll be stuff from the Season 4 of this TV show that can also come back into play in the Season 6. And overall, I think this would work really well as a TV series. It would be really interesting to go on this long journey that spans across so many different eras. And yes, I left off Black Ops 3 and 4 because, of course, Black Ops 4 doesn't even have a campaign, and Black Ops 3's campaign doesn't really have much to do with everything else. I mean, there's concepts in Black Ops 3's campaign that would be cool to see maybe included in this Season 6, but I just don't see the point of doing a whole season focused on that game. It wouldn't really make any sense. I do think it would be cool if some of these specialist characters from Black Ops 4 made an appearance in these games, especially for those final 2 seasons, because I do think some of those characters are pretty cool and have pretty interesting backstories. But again, there's no reason to have a whole story adapted from them when nobody really cares about the story to begin with. The next idea I have is a Call of Duty World War II miniseries. It would basically be adapting a bunch of different World War II storylines from Call of Duty's franchise in a miniseries. So basically you take stuff from Call of Duty World at War, Call of Duty World War II, even Call of Duty Vanguard. I know people hate that game, but there are a couple elements of that campaign that I thought were pretty cool. I really liked the character of Polina. I think she would be a cool addition to this miniseries. And then obviously characters like Reznov would have a big role to play, and some of the characters from COD World War II with the Eastern Front. You could definitely make a miniseries out of that. It would probably just be like 10 episodes of just a retelling of World War II, but through the lens of Call of Duty characters. I think that'd be pretty interesting. And this one could take place in the same universe as the Black Ops TV series, especially with Rezanov being there, because obviously he's going to be a part of season 1 of that series. So it would work well with these being in the same universe, but I don't see any reason for the Modern Warfare Trilogy to be in the same universe. And then of course, we got to talk about Call of Duty Zombies, because this is what a lot of people want to see more than anything. And most people I've been seeing on the internet have been saying that it should be a TV series or even animated. Personally, I would prefer they did a movie franchise out of it, just because I would of course love to see this stuff on the big screen, and I honestly don't think you need a whole series out of the zombie storyline. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff to the zombie storyline, but let's be honest with ourselves, a lot of it is fluff. A lot of it is not necessary for the full story to work. You can definitely simplify the story a bit so it actually works for most audiences. Would it take a lot of movies to do it? Yes, probably like 7+ movies, but would it still be really damn cool? Yes. Of course, I'd be okay with them doing a TV series instead, or an animated series or whatever, but I would just prefer it being a live action movie franchise. I think that would be a lot cooler. The first film would very obviously be just the World at War zombie story, which there is more than enough story for that game for it to be a full film. And I think the best way to do it is for the first half of the movie to feel like you're watching the movie Oppenheimer, where you see the creation of Group 935, you see Richtofen and Maxis doing all these experiments after they discover Element 115, and they start making these wonder weapons, and then they create zombies with the teleporters, and all this crazy shit goes down, and they're like, what is going on with all these experiments? And there's a lot of like World War II politics and trying to figure out how to navigate all that. And then of course you get introduced to the other characters like Dempsey, Takio, and Nikolai on their own separate missions, where they end up getting captured and then turned into test subjects for Richtofen, where they eventually lose their memory and start becoming the versions of the characters that we know from the Ultimates crew. And then like halfway through the film, that's when things would get crazy, where the zombie outbreak would fully happen after Richtofen sends Maxis and Samantha through the teleporter. Samantha gets control of the zombies, she starts controlling them, and she just starts sending hordes and hordes of zombies towards Richtofen, and he gets the help of the other test subjects, of course, the ones that are still alive, because of course Pablo would have died by now. And it turns into a full, just zombie-filled, action-packed film for the final half of the movie. You would have scenes at the Rising Sun facility with Shinonuma, you'd have scenes at the Dariz facility, and it would just be absolutely insane. And you would use music from Call of Duty Zombies. You would use the Kevin Sherwood songs for various action montages and just crazy stuff like that. You cannot tell me that wouldn't be the coolest shit ever in live action. If it was done well, they actually got good sets for those maps. Like imagine having authentic sets for Shinonuma and Dariz. That would blow my mind. There would also be some scenes at the facility in Siberia, which of course is the Call of the Dead map. That's where they actually kept the test subjects themselves. So you'd have scenes from all sorts of different maps in this one movie, and it would just be absolutely insane. And it'd probably end with them teleporting to the Kino facility in 1963, which would lead into the second film, which would be all about the Black Ops zombie storyline, which obviously would just go through the events of the Call of Duty Black Ops zombie storyline. And that second movie would be pretty solid as well. You could start with a scene of JFK and the other characters at the Pentagon fighting zombies. Would that not be the coolest thing ever? And of course, there would be some campiness to it. I think they should keep as much of this franchise serious as possible, but there's obviously campy elements to zombies that are just inevitable, and I think they should just kind of organically happen. Don't make jokes out of it, just make it organically work, because the idea of JFK fighting zombies is obviously going to be funny no matter what. The second movie would end with Richtofen's grand scheme being fully executed, with him switching bodies with Samantha, and then of course Earth would get hit with the missiles, all that crazy shit would happen. And then after this movie, I feel like things get a little bit messy, because I don't think it would be a great idea to do the third film entirely with the Victus crew and that's it. I do think you'd have to have the original characters involved in some way, shape, or form. And like I said before, I don't think any of these adaptations should be one-to-one exactly. You would want to change things up to make it fit the movie or the TV show a bit better. So I do think it would make sense to have a lot of scenes with the Primus crew in the third film kind of intertwining with the Victus crew. And I don't know exactly how they make that structure work, but I think it definitely could work with a good enough creative team behind it. And the third film would end with the ending of Origins, of course. But then I think from here on out, you have to do a spin-off film with Mob of the Dead. I think Mob of the Dead as a whole, that storyline is so deep and just so incredible that you could do a full film of that. These characters just stuck in this eternal purgatory on Alcatraz Island. That would be an amazing spin-off movie. I don't even think it has to be part of like the main timeline, but of course it does connect in a lot of different ways that will be important, but it could kind of act as a spin-off. And then the next film after that would also be another spin-off, being the Shadows of Evil story, which could also kind of be its own one-off movie. And then you would have a full movie focused on the Black Ops 3 storyline from the Giant to Revelations. And then you have the final movie being the Black Ops 4 story, which of course would be from Blood of the Dead to Togg Towan. And if they want to change stuff to make it fit better for the movie, of course they can do it. There's definitely stuff to do, stuff to change around to make it work. And I think overall you'd have a pretty good story there. And I don't think they should bother adapting the Dark Aether storyline, at least not just yet, because honestly, there's really not a lot to it at this point. So I don't really think they would have to, but it's there if they want to touch it eventually, maybe they could. And I also don't think they should bother with the Chaos storyline because, to be honest, I want to see that continued with the games themselves. I feel like they didn't even do enough with the story yet for it to be something they should adapt at this point. The Aether story is the one that actually feels complete, so I think it makes more sense to do adaptations of that. And for the non-Treyarch zombie storylines, I mean, I wouldn't really be that interested in seeing adaptations of them, but I do think an animated series based on the Infinite Warfare game would be kind of interesting, but other than that, not really too interested. And that's basically all of the ideas I have. Of course, there are some other Call of Duty campaigns, but I honestly don't think any of them need adaptations at this point, nor would it really make sense to do them. The only other Call of Duty campaign that has a story that I absolutely love and am very interested in would be the Infinite Warfare storyline. That campaign is, in my opinion, the best Call of Duty campaign, but the thing is, I feel like they already perfectly executed that story within the Infinite Warfare campaign, to the point where I don't have much interest in seeing them adapt that. I feel like all of the other storylines could actually get really cool adaptations to it that would be something they could add to and could actually make it work even better in film or TV show form. But Infinite Warfare just doesn't need that. I feel like it was already perfectly handled, so just leave it at that. Regardless, I'm very excited that this is happening. I really am hopeful for it. Of course, it could end up being bad for all we know. Maybe every movie and show they make will be terrible. Who knows? But even if that happens, I'm at least happy they tried. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.